2 minutes, and then we can start.
Okay.
Professor Chantal Mouffe has been a professor at the University of Westminster for many years. She's a political theorist, and among her most known books are Hegemony and Socialist Strategy with Ernesto Laclau, The Return of the Political, The Democratic Paradox, and so on. And more recently, we have For a Left Populism. Chantal, if you want to start now.
Yeah, wait a second. I'm going to try to see if maybe, is it better like that or before, because I put a cushion, so it will be a bit higher. Is it better now?
Yes.
It's fine, Chantal. It's
fine.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Good. All right. Good. Okay. So, well, I'm going to tell you about the kind of work I'm doing at the moment, and speak about my last book too, which I think is going to be coming out in Portuguese very soon, if it's not yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a translation now.
It's already in
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, because they wanted me to go to the launch of the book to us, but the case. Okay, look, so first, I'm going to make some kind of introduction to situate my reflection, and then I will go straight to the analysis of the populist moment, yeah? But I think it's important to present the context of my idea. First, I want to insist that this book, the For a Left Populism, is really a political intervention. Of course, all of my book, in some sense, are political intervention. You know, there is always an articulation of theoretical with politics, but this one is much more political in a sense, because I feel that there is really an urgency today. We are at a kind of turning point, and I think that, you know, this is something which what motivated me to write that book was really, I think, well, it's very important for the left to have an adequate strategy in the populist movement, because if they don't have a good strategy, then of course right-wing populist movement are going to take advantage of this populist movement. Okay, so it's very something, clearly a political question. What should the strategy of the left be at the moment? Another point that I want to specify is that my reflection is really located in a specific conjuncture in Western Europe. I insist Western Europe because it's not even for all of Europe. For instance, I think that the condition in, well, Eastern Europe or ex-communist countries like Hungary, Poland, I mean, of course, they are points which are in common, but they've got a different story, different tradition because of the time in which they were under communist, domination. So I think that the strategies should not be exactly the same. So I'm really speaking of Western Europe. That I think is important. So, for instance, I'm not thinking about the situation in Latin America. I'm certainly not, thinking on the basis of what the situation in Brazil. But nevertheless, I think that there are some insight that can be useful for you too. And in fact, I've already had many reactions from Latin America, from Chile, from Argentina, when they say, well, even if your reflection is situated in Western Europe, a lot of the things that you say are really very good, important for us, but I want to insist on that. It's starting from, what the situation in Western Europe. In fact, I always insist on theoretical reflection need always to be situated in a specific conjuncture, You know that I'm not this kind of normative political philosopher who say, this is how the thing should be all over the world. No, I'm thinking always, starting from a conjuncture. Another point which is important to clarify is the way in which I use this term populism, because of course, populism, it becomes something that, it's lost really almost every meaning, because it's used now in such a wide way to everything that people don't like is populist. So the way I'm using the term populism is, in fact, I'm basing my reflection on what Ernesto Laclau in his book, The Populist Reason, say. That his book really is a theoretical reflection about, what populism is. And he insists that populism is a political logic. So it's something which is not an ideology, it's not a regime, certainly not a regime. It's, in fact, a strategy of construction of the political frontier. Here I want to clarify something, because already it indicates that in order to understand this conception of populism, you need to locate yourself in a specific conception of what is the political. To the question, what is the political? There are, in fact, basically two answers. One, which is called the associative conception of the political, and the other one, the dissociative conception. According to the associative conception, politics is acting in common, is the place where we should all try to establish a consensus. Of course, this is the conception which is dominant in political theory, and is certainly also the conception which is dominant in what can be called, but in a broad sense, liberal thought. Liberal here understanding, for instance, a conception in which we've got both people like Habermas and Jean Rawls. So it is liberal in the sense of not political liberalism, of course. So this is the two conceptions. The politics for the associative conception is basically acting in common for consensus. And then there is the dissociative conception, which is a conception that also got, a trajectory. For instance, it begins with, Thucydides, and then we've got Machiavelli, and then we've got, for Obst, of course, but also, for instance, Max Weber, Carl Schmitt, and for this dissociative conception of the politics is about conflict, it's about antagonism, it's about precisely constructing a frontier between us and them. This is very important, because if you don't locate yourself in a dissociative conception, then you can't understand the very idea of the populism as construction of the political logic. And this is for instance, it's clear that for the liberals, there is no frontier, because they say my idea is precisely to create a us that will be completely inclusive. But according to the dissociative conception, no, this is not possible. There is politics is both construction of the frontier, and it really is going to depend on how the frontier is constructed. Here I want to insist that on one side, I've just said, liberalism does not construct a political frontier. In fact, it refuses the idea that there is a political frontier that divides people. But Marxism does construct a political frontier. But for Marxism, the political frontier is between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, capital labor. Well, the way the populists construct the political frontier is different from Marxism. They've got in common of saying politics is about constructing a political frontier, but according to the populist conception, as defended by Ernesto Laclau, of course, politics, the frontier is between the people from below and the people from above. So it can be translated the people against the establishment, the people against the oligarchy. You see the difference, between the way of constructing a frontier, the Marxist and the populist one. A third point that I want to emphasize before I enter into my analysis of the populist moment is that the people is a political construction. And that's also something that many people don't understand. They believe that the people is a sociological category. And for instance, there they confund the people with the population. The people as a political category is not the population, It's always a specific articulation. It's the way the us is constructed, but of course there will be the them, the people, those who are not part of the people. But so I think it's very important to realize that we are not speaking here in terms of sociological categories, but in terms of political categories that are constructed. And here, of course, it means that, and that's another point which is important theoretically, you can't understand this approach if you don't locate yourself into an anti-essentialist perspective. The kind of perspective that Ernesto Laclau and I developed in Hegemony and Socialist Strategy, that the socialist is always a discursive space, that identities are not given as essences. They are not that, essences existing and to be represented. Our identities are always the result of a political construction. That's also crucial to understand, the perspective that I'm developing. So it needs to be located into a discourse, a dissociative conception of the political and an anti-essentialist perspective. Okay, now that we've got those points clarified, we can go to analyze what I speak by the populist moment. So the populist moment for me is a specific conjuncture. Again, I'm interested in the way this conjuncture take place in Western Europe. But basically what is at stake here is the crisis of neoliberal hegemony. And in fact, here it's important to realize that a populist moment always takes place in a moment of a crisis. There is link always with populist moment and crisis because it's a moment when a lot of demand cannot be processed, channeled by the traditional political form, and then there is something that put into question. It's a putting into question of the existing systems. When I say crisis of neoliberal hegemony, here I insist on the term hegemony. I'm not saying that we are in a terminal crisis of neoliberalism in the economic system, even if I agree that there are serious obstacles for this system to remain. But that's not what interests me. It's more the idea of the neoliberal hegemony. That is the fact that and that is something that is rather recent. It's basically something we could put the moment in which this crisis began is the 2008 economic crisis. Because till then, there was still the idea that the neoliberal globalization was the solution to all the problem, and particularly there was no alternative to neoliberal globalization. I'm coming back to that in a moment when I speak about the post-political. But today, I think this has been put into question. People realize that all the contradiction of neoliberalism were brought to the fore by the 2008 crisis, and now people don't believe anymore that the neoliberalism, neoliberal globalization is the solution to all our problems. So that's quite important. And then what we are seeing, and this is what for me is the specificity of the populist moment, we've been seeing a series of resistances. I mean, people speak of anti-system movement. There is clearly, and again, that is something that has been particularly accelerated by the 2008 crisis. In fact, it began this also in a sense to 2011, the famous movement of the place, Indignados in Spain, Occupy Wall Street, a series of resistances putting into question the idea that, neoliberal was the solution. So, and this, in fact, I interpret them in terms of those are resistances, again, what I call post-democracy. The term I've not invented it, is something that is being used by Colin Crowe, by Jacques Rancière, but post-democracy is something for me. This is really composed of two specific phenomena. First, I want to say post-democracy is definitely, some people in fact speak of the de-democratization of our societies. It's basically going in the same direction, that our societies are in fact getting less and less democratic, and this is why I call them post-democratic. There are two phenomena in this post-democracy. A first one, which I call post-politics, and that, for instance, clearly something that I already analyze in my book on the political, when I analyze the way in which through the development of third way politics, the idea that there was no more antagonism, we've been moving to the center of left parties, and that basically there is no possibility for citizens when they go to vote to have a choice, because the difference between center right and center left is really a minimum. With my student, I'm joking, it's between Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola, so this is post-politics. But there is another phenomenon which is also part of post-democracy, and that's more to do with the economic aspect, because post-politics is basically, the level of politics. It's a phenomenon of what I call oligarchization of our society. And that's, again, is something that obviously is a consequence of 30 years of neoliberal hegemony, and particularly accelerated by the predominance of financial capitalism. I don't have time to go into that, but this is something which is well known. Clearly, we are in societies in which today there is a gulf, bigger and bigger, between a very decreasing group of very rich people getting a small group getting more and richer, and on the other side, the working class, of course, becoming poor, but also, and I think that's important for me, a proletarization, could we call, or precarization, pauperization of the middle classes. So the gulf is very much between, and this is why I think the populist formation of the them is particularly relevant, because it's clear that the two facts in which we are seeing an exponential increase of inequality. Now, that's a book, for instance, that is well documented by Thomas Piketty and in his book Capitalism in the 21st Century. And also that's something very recent and particularly accelerated under neoliberalism. And I call that post-democracy because, in fact, and here I refer to another of my book, The Democratic Paradox, where I have argued that what we understand, we speak of democracy, it's basically a Western conception of democracy, which results from the articulation of two different traditions. The tradition of political liberalism, rule of law, separation of power, we could say the idea of liberty, and on the other side, the democratic tradition, whose main ideas are equality and popular sovereignty. So, and I, of course, also in the book insist that there is always a tension between, liberty and equality, because there is an impossibility of a society where you have perfect equality and perfect liberty. There is always one which is lexically superior. Okay, what is happening today under neoliberalism, in fact, is that this tension. And this tension, I want to insist, I see that, and that is all my discussion with Carl Schmitt, because Schmitt said there is a contradiction between, liberalism and democracy. Well, Habermas, on the contrary, said no, they go necessarily together, liberalism and democracy, equality and liberty. There is, Habermas, a co-originality of those two values. Well, here and that's the center of my book on the democratic paradox. I say no, of course there is, they don't go necessarily together, but I don't think we should see that as a contradiction which makes liberal democracy impossible, as Schmitt say, but see that more, in fact, as the locus of paradoxical places where, in fact, we can see the possibility of pluralism, because there is where, in this tension, this renegotiation between which principle is going to be, lexically superior. Is it liberty or is it equality? I mean, that's finally most of, democratic politics is being about that. So I think that we should not try to eliminate that. It's a tension which is very productive. The problem is that today there is no more tension because there is such a dominance of the liberal principle. But here, liberal reinterpreted through neoliberal categories. It's not the traditional political liberalism. So everything which has got to do with equality and popular sovereignty has been eliminated. They say, no, what is this? Popular sovereignty, it's an obsolete, it's a zombie category, say people. And this is what I call post-democracy. Our societies still call themselves democratic, but there is no space anymore for the main idea of popular sovereignty and equality. And here, if you can see how it is through politics that popular sovereignty has been eliminated, because popular sovereignty, and here, of course, I'm perfectly aware that this is a concept which is very, very problematic. I'm using that, in fact, in a sense, I think I can say that it's a totemist mask, popular sovereignty. And I tend to agree with him. But I think that popular sovereignty is very important at the level of the political imaginary in a democracy. Even if it's impossible to realize a perfect popular sovereignty, I think I interpret that in a sense which is much more, trivial in a way. Popular sovereignty, people want to have a say. They want to have a voice. If they don't have a voice, if they don't have the possibility of choosing between at least, a different alternative at the election, then they feel that the idea of popular sovereignty is really something which has been eliminated. And if, for instance, I think there's something that the indignados in Spain were claiming, which I think is very appropriate. They were saying, we've got a vote, yeah, we can vote, but we don't have a voice, because, of course, if you vote an election between two parties who basically are giving the same thing, you have a vote, but not a voice. And I think this is in that sense that I speak that the idea of popular sovereignty, of having a voice. So that's what I want to insist on that, because I know that, and particularly for you people who are in philosophy of law, the idea of popular sovereignty, there's a lot of books written on that. So it's in a very ordinary sense, to have a voice, feeling that we have the possibility of being listened to, of having some influence in politics. Okay, so the situation that we have today in Western Europe is a situation of post-democracy, in which people feel that only, the idea of liberty interpreted, of course, in terms of liberty of the market and liberty of the question of choice, but is what is dominant. Well, so, and here I come to a point which is I know it's controversial, because what I'm saying is that most of the struggle that we are seeing today in Western Europe against post-democracy or democracy are in fact democratic struggle as far as they are resistances against post-democracy. But those democratic struggle can be articulated in different ways. And this is, for instance, where the difference between right-wing populism and left-wing populism really arises. Because it all depends on how the people is going to be constructed and who the adversary is going to be also constructed. And of course, there are many different ways in which those struggles, which are democratic as far as they are a call for democracy, can be articulated. And there is, in fact, I think we can distinguish two different ways of constructing the people and of wanting to recover democracy. Because in both cases, people want to recover democracy. But democracy can be recovered in a way in which basically you are going to restrict it. And this is what right-wing populism does. Because, for instance, they want to recover democracy, but only for a small sector of the population. You know, for instance, and here I would like to give the example of Marine Le Pen, because I think she's particularly typical of that. She is very progressive in a sense, because she wants to defend the welfare state. I must say that she was in many cases more on the left, one could say, that François Hollande, but only for the native, you know. This is so democratic, yes, but only for the native. And for instance, when she constructs the people, there's no space for the immigrant into that people. The immigrants are a part of the them, you know. While the case of a left-wing populism, which is the case of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, of course, the people is constructed differently. The immigrants are part of the people, and in this case, the them, you know, is the oligarchy, is the people who are the transnational corporation, the hedge fund, all those who are, you know, the basic defender of and who are also you know, the people in power around neoliberalism. So you see, it's very important to realize that the way the people is constructed is very, very different according to right-wing populism and left-wing populism. And I mean, as I was saying, I think that there's some urgency, because today what we are seeing is that, in fact, the right-wing populist parties are on the rise in Western Europe. By the way, already on the political, and that was published in 2005, I was criticizing the idea that, you know, there was no more antagonism and society become more mature, saying, no, that's going to create the condition for the rise of right-wing populism. At that time, there was only, in fact, two important right-wing populist parties, the FPÖ from Georg Haider in Austria and Jean-Marie Le Pen, you know. Today, in Western Europe, we've got right-wing populist parties everywhere. So it shows that, of course, this idea that it's a progress for democracy, when this post-democracy, basically that's what they will say, is not a progress for democracy. It is what creates the condition for the development of right-wing populism. But I think that, and this is why, as I was saying at the beginning, for me, the main question is that, okay, what should the left do in this circumstance? How can you resist and fight against right-wing populism? And here is where there is a very big discussion among the left. And many critics of my position are saying, no, that, you know, one should not even take account of what moved the people for voting for right-wing populism, because those people are necessarily, and of course this is a completely essentialist position. They say in France there is a big debate about that. You know, people who vote for Marine Le Pen, they are essentially sexist, racist, homophobe, and we should not, you know, really even, you know, take care of their demand. What I am saying, and this is the crux, I will argue, of my argument, is that it's all a question of all the democratic demands are articulated. Of course, I'm not saying that there are not people who are basically, you know, sexist, racist, homophobe, and that, but I believe, and there is an interesting debate about that, that many of the people, popular classes, who vote for Marine Le Pen, who vote for Marine Le Pen, is because they've been abandoned by the social democratic parties. You know, because the social democratic parties have moved to the center, to the right, they concern only with the problem of the middle class, and they have really abandoned the popular sector. And I think this is something which we can see, you know, in all of the Western Europe, and of course is a link with the, you know, in which social democracy is abandoned, you know, its radical character. All right. So I think that if we just can't, and I feel very strongly about that. We can't just say, oh, you know, those popular classes, they are racist, we should not care about. We should try to understand why. And I think for left parties, it's very important wonder, what have we been doing wrongly with those people? Why do they feel abandoned? Why do they vote for those parties? And I think that if we don't ask that question, if we simply dismiss those demands for being demand of homophobes, then of course we are creating the terrain for the growth and the victory of right-wing populism. So I think it's very important for the left to really understand that they need to make an autocritique and try to see what. So, for instance, I think that there is one demand of and here, for instance, well, we can discuss that if you want, but I realize that I already got my time finished. There is, can I put that, a consequence of the COVID-19 crisis, is the fact that people feel there is a demand for protection. People feel they want to protect them, and this demand for protection can be something that is easily articulated by right-wing populists, because they say, "Oh, we are going to protect you and from the immigrant," and I think that it's very important for the left to realize that it's central to take in seriously this demand for protection and to articulate it with democratic values, to democratic, because if they don't do that, then they are again helping the rise of right-wing populism. So in fact, what I am, and this is the kind of things I'm working at the moment, what could be, because the question, of course, is that left-wing populism, the strategy should be to articulate all the democratic demand. I mean, the demand against, struggle against inequality, but of a different type. For instance, this is, and that obviously something you'll remember in hegemony and socialist strategy. We're already saying it's crucial to articulate the demand of the working class with the demand of the new social movement. Well, this is more pertinent than ever. Because in fact, those new social movements, they become struggle against racism, against sexism, and they're even more and more important. But it's crucial to articulate that with the demand of the working class. And of course, the ecological question, because this is another question which is central, the defense of the planet. So there's a necessity to defend a project to create a collective will, because this is what's really at stake in a left populist strategy. How are we going to create a collective will that is going to be able to operate a democratic rupture with neoliberalism? This popular collective will, of course, need to articulate all those different demands. And I'm perfectly aware that is not easy. And we could already show example of, ways in which this is unfortunately not happening. And that it is creating an advantage for right-wing populism. I could, for instance, tell you, I think the result of the election in Poland at the moment are really clearly an example of that. I mean, the Brexit in Britain, I think that is crucial to find a ways in which one can win the popular classes to an alliance with people defending struggle against racism, against sexism, and also ecological questions. So I think that we need what I call an articulating principle for this collective will. We need to have what can be called an hegemonic signifier, and I think that this hegemonic signifier should be something like a Green New Deal. I think I'm very, very positive against the way in which Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and have developed this idea of the Green New Deal, because it's clearly a way that articulates the demands of the inequality of the popular sector with the demand against inequality in race and sex with the ecological demand. And I think that this could be the hegemonic signifier that could bring together all those different constituencies, which of course have got heterogeneous demand, so it's not going to be easy. But this is exactly what I understand by left populist strategy. to bring together those people. And of course, and I finish on this, for me, this is something that needs to acknowledge the importance of affects, what I call passion in politics, because, and again, that's a point on which I think that the traditional left is very, very bad. They believe that, no, you only need to give arguments, and this is how you are convinced people. I think that, and unfortunately, right-wing populists are much more aware of the importance of mobilizing passion, and I think that this is crucial, to find a way to create a collective will, to mobilize passion, a road signifier, like, how to, basically what's at stake is how we are going to find a way to radicalize democracy. And the fight against right-wing populism is a fight to recover the democratic value, but to radicalize them, not to restrict them to a certain sector of the population. Okay, so those are basically the main ideas of what I'm working on at the moment.
Thank you, Chantal. So I propose to start with Katia, and then Betania, and finally me. And if we have more time left, we open to a few more questions from the audience. So
Okay.
Katia, okay, Chantal, is it okay for you?
Okay,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, so Katia, go ahead.
Chantal, thank you very much again. And I have been following your work for more than 2 decades now. And I'd like to start quoting you in an interview that you had a few years ago, quoting, "My work has always been driven by a desire to understand what is happening in the world so as to be able to intervene in it. I truly believe in the power of ideas. Otherwise, I would not have chosen to be a theorist," end of quote. More or less, you said this when you start your explanation today. This is a political intervention, not just a theoretical one. And what I have in mind thinking about democracy today is, if we think about post-democracy in the way you are thinking, in the way Ernest Laclau did, or even Colin Crouch. Colin Crouch speaks about corporate and the others. Laclau speaks about the underdog and the others. There is a strong economical point of view when we talk about post-democracy. And as I have said, and you are saying this for many years, it's necessary to have a chain of equivalence, some anti-establishment movements, demands. You talked that you are not thinking about Brazil or Latin America, but it's impossible not to bring Brazil into the picture. And having Brazil into this picture with Bolsonaro, for example, we see clearly that we have an economical situation here, but more than that, it's a return to the conservative moods, the movements. The demands in Brazil are all of them conservatives, racists, sexists, and our main party, PT, of the left, is not able to articulate these demands today. For PT, the only problem is to articulate the struggle for the workers. So if you have this this situation in mind, how to talk about affects, passions, is for me, is very difficult to use these passions in favor of equality, in favor of social justice, if the world is going to the very concept of political as to eliminate, to fight with the enemy in a Schmittian sense. How do effective articulate these demands nowadays, left demands? If you have so many exclusion, not only in the economical point of view, but in the every arena that we are living today. That's it.
Yeah, well, look, it's a pity we could have. In fact, I would be very interested to discuss with you about the situation in Brazil, because for me it's a little bit of a mystery to understand. Because look, many of the people who voted for Bolsonaro, they had voted for the PT first, no?
Sorry, yeah.
First. Yeah, they voted for the PT. Okay, so in fact, this is for me what is. It means that those people were moved by some kind of different value, different affects. So you say when they voted for the PT, they were moved for the. How is it that that the same people who voted for the PT no voted for Bolsonaro? I think that. Well, it's a question. I think the case of Brazil is particularly interesting. By the way, there is something that I want to say also about Brazil. But again, it will be, we will need to have a long discussion about that. I will not put Bolsonaro in the category of right-wing populist. I think that is much worse than that. He's a proto-fascist, And this is also why I am in much of my work, in particular, and I know again it's controversial, because I refuse to call the people, for instance, like Marine Le Pen, fascist. There is a part of the left who say, no, but those people are fascist. They don't agree. They say, it's too much to call them by people. No, they are simply fascist. I except for Bolsonaro, because I think Bolsonaro definitively is not a right-wing populist. It's, I say, fascist or at least proto-fascist. And in that sense, I think that is much worse than Trump. They present him as some kind of Trump of the tropics. I think no. I mean, it's much worse than Trump's. Of course, and then you can say the question is that how are we going to if people I don't know could do that, but no, let me put it in another way. What did the PT did wrong so that it could lose the people who voted for him and go to Bolsonaro? I think that there is clearly something that will need to be examined there. In that they must have felt. Of course, I know that the propaganda, all those things, obviously, those is very very important. But basically, they must have feel disappointed, abandoned. They must, if it's for me, it's a little bit of well, Mr. I would really like to understand. I think one cannot answer your question, if one does not understand what happened with the PT, what were the main shortcomings of the PT to have been able to really lose the people who voted for them, because then. And I think that it's a question. When I speak of affects, I need and this is what I find the Green New Deal. I think this one need to find ways in which people get enthusiastic about a project. Feel hope, because politics is in fact. Spinoza used to say there are two main passions in politics: fear and hope. And the whole question is that some right-wing populist parties, of course, move the people towards fear, and the left should bring them, move towards hope. I think we need to find a project that is going to give hope, but also something that enthusiasms the people. This is why I'm so critical of the pure rationalist things, to say you are not going to convince people by giving them, argument or statistics. You need to find a way in which they are going to be moved to act. Well, it could be you can feel people move to act against, of course, and I think that this is probably, again, it will be interesting to have a discussion about that, what Bolsonaro is being good about, to create fear, and then how to the whole question, but I know it's a very, very big issue, how is the left going to develop a project in which people are going to feel, this is give them hope. That's for me the question, And again, I think it's a question of affect, because again, to quote Spinoza used to say, ideas only have power when they encounter affects. It's not simply, but no. In order for an idea to have a power, it needs to touch you, to have resonances with what you feel. So I think this is really what it's absolutely to be crucial in a left populist strategy, to find ways in which people are going to recognize themselves in a project, to feel that they are basically. I'm giving you an example of what I'm saying about the Brexit vote, and of course I was a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, and for me it was really disappointing. But analyzing the situation, no, if you see the mot d'ordre, the Boris Johnson and the it was, well, first when the referendum was take back control, it's something that people feel empowered, but take back control, and the election was, let's Brexit done. There are some projects that make people feel empowered. On the other side, you had the Labour Party, who was saying, vote for us and we are going to give you, free broadband. We are going to, it was not something that was mobilizing people. It was the kind of thing in which people were recipients, some kind of clientelism, and of course, it was the campaign of Boris Johnson was much more powerful, because this had to take back control, he feel empowered. And I think that this is what is important for the left, not to give them a lot of lists, so we are going to give you that and that, no, because then they are the passive recipient of, the good thing that the state is going to give them. No, you need to find a mot d'ordre that are going to mobilize them, to feel that they give them power, to give them a voice. And but this is what I understand by affect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chantal. So I'll take Betania's question. And Chantal, would be better if we take like 2 questions each time, and what do you prefer? So
well,
Betania,
it depends, because some question, I prefer to have them separately.
Okay, fine. Betania, please.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see you again and to hear you, dear Professor Chantal Mouffe. At least those technologies allowed us to have these little pleasures. I want to thank Katia and Vera. I have been really following the whole populist structure since the populist reason with Laclau, and it's very funny because at that time I discussed a populist reason at the Lula era in Brazil, so it matches quite beautifully because it was a theoretical book, but at the same time the book was pretty much into where is the left populism as a concrete figure? So for us, it was really clear that Laclau would have in mind, I mean, it would fit into Lula's figure. I have discussed your new book last year with the students in which we were quite close to Bolsonaro's government, and I would to reconsider just some premises of your argument, Chantal, to get into my question, which is quite simple. I followed the Critique and Praxis 1313 that was dedicated to your book. I don't know if you
what which one?
The Critique and Praxis at Hardcourt seminar at Columbia, the 1313 that was dedicated to your book, with many people arguing on it. So you follow the...
Well, no, I mean, I knew it took place, but I don't know what happened during that time.
Was a whole panel dedicated to your book. Of course, I mean, they called many normative philosophers. What was quite interesting to see exactly what you said before, that you said very, very, very clearly that it's not a normative question in terms of philosophical normative question. It's a practical. So what I want to reconstruct that I am absolutely, I mean, I'm quite 100%, I agree with your philosophical, let's put it that way, premises of what you consider populism, no? So the strategic discourse of populism. So the importance of the left to have a strategic of discourse. So populism will fulfill that gap, especially because it's anti-essentialist, it's constructivist. So it could provoke the combine of a collective will between working class and social movement. So I would agree with almost all that you have said. What struggles me is that if you really consider the project about praxis and not about theory, I'll say what theory would be the book on populist reason, why still fighting for the terminology? In terms of philosophical discourse, the terminology is full of difficulty in order to clarify it. And I am with you. So that my question is to emphasize the argument, because I know the importance of having this collective will and not normatively, but built on hope. Even if you say that Bolsonaro is not a populist, he used strategics of populism. I mean, he used this potency of using hope collectively, getting people from high society to the poor extract of society together at one social political common imaginary. So why still fighting for it? Because all the examples that you gave, and that I finished all the good examples of left populism that you gave it in the book, most of them are social movements of resistance. So why still stick with the word populism if you don't want to consider populism as a strategy of a government? Because Corbyn is a candidate. So if populism is not only being considered as something that fulfill us with a candidate that could bind social class, working class to social movements, it's something else in this idea of resistance and many expressions of resistance. Why still using the terminology? That would be my question, Chantal. Because when Laclau thought about populism, he had Latin American left populism in his mind. I guess you, because I think it. But now, left populism in Latin American, it's quite fragile. So, what is the practical examples that would lead that in terms of governance, not in terms of resistance from social movements? That's it. Thank you very much.
I'm not quite sure I understand. I mean, because well, first, something I mean, there is a debate. There are some people who say that left populism does not exist. For instance, somebody like Jan Werner Müller, and many of them say no, populism is only right-wing populism. You know, when, for instance, I mean, and I've been having discussion with journalists, well, for Podemos present themselves as left populist. I know, but they are not. You know, I say, well, no, they are not, because Jan Werner Müller decide this is what is populist and not populist. Okay. On the other side, there are some people, and among them some of my good friends, who say one can only have left populism. You know, right-wing populism, that's not they say that's fascism. That's not what people. It's only the true populism. It's only left populism. Well, you know, I think that if you locate yourself into a discursive construction, you realize that the people can be constructed in many different ways. You know, and also I find it very problematic to simply dismiss a movement like the Marine Le Pen and say all those people are fascists, you know. And it's not true, because there are many people who vote for well, let's say what I'm concerned about is not so much how to define those things, but to find what move people, particularly popular classes, to vote for those parties. That's my question, because my question, as I was saying, is basically how are we going to construct a collective will in order, you know, to establish the democratic rupture and to radicalize democracy. Well, this collective will, I don't want to accept the claim that popular classes have no place in that collective will because they are fascist. No, I'm saying that, you know, I can't imagine a project of the left that does not include the popular classes. Unfortunately, you know, and I think I'm thinking here very much of the situation in Europe, and particularly in France. There is a strong tendency, and we've seen that recently against, oh no, you know, there is a split between and for instance, again, I can give you the example of Poland, what happened the election. I think it's very worrying to see the split which is happening in many countries between what called the cities and the rural area on the other side, because in the cities we've got, you know, educated people and people who are, it's true, much more open to the matter of you know, LGBT and all that, and also people who are now basically ecological movement, they are voting for ecological movement, and so they are saying those are the good people, you know, the progressive people. And of course, on the other side, you've got, and this is, for instance, one must realize that if you see the result of the Justice and Party movement, Law and Justice Party in Poland, you know, and well, they are very, very strong among popular classes and among the rural areas. On the other side, in the cities, you know, you have more people who are more enlightened. But the program that the other party, the Democratic, the one which is the candidate, that's basically a program which is very, very neoliberal. And in fact, in terms of social justice, and the party of Kaczynski is much more advanced. You know, you can see that they are. I think it's very, very dangerous to have a situation in which you've got, well, what Nancy Fraser called progressive neoliberalism. You know, I think that and a split between progressive neoliberalism, in which you've got all the ecological, and then on the other side, the popular classes who vote for the. And this is precisely what I want to avoid. And I think that if we begin to say that all those parties are fascist, I mean, we don't realize that in fact they articulate in a way which, of course, I think that I completely in disagreement with, but they do articulate what are democratic demands. And I think that the left need to be, to listen to that, to see what the popular classes vote for many of those parties because they feel that they've been abandoned by the left, And this is so my question is this. In fact, you are right. Sometimes not so much. Well, but let's say basically, yeah. My insistence in going on speaking of right-wing populism is to call the attention of the left on the fact that those parties, they do articulate democratic demand. They articulate them in a way which is going to restrict democracy, but they are consonant, and we need not just reject them, those people who vote for those parties on the basis that they are fascist. No, and again, of course, that is basically an essentialist position. People are bold, and we can't win them over. I think that my question that how could we win those people over for a left populism? Again, to what something that Podemos used to say, they want to be transversal because they say, well, we don't want to only speak to the people who consider themselves on the left, who vote for the left, because we believe that there are many people who vote for the Parti Popular, vote for the right, traditionally, but who are also affected by the politics of privatization, who are also suffering of the effect of neoliberalism. So we need to find a discourse to bring those people over to a left populist project, And this is that by calling those parties fascist, automatically dismiss them. We should not, and a lot of people say that, we should not even listen to the people who vote for the party. In fact, Jean-Luc Mélenchon in France, he had been criticized because during the movement of the yellow vest, he was, but you go and in demonstration in which, you are going, there are people who vote for the National Front Rassemblement National. Like if those people had some kind of disease that, you can't approach them. I think that we need to recover those people, to win them over. And this is why, what motivates me, But by the way, it's a pity that we don't have time, because I'll be very interested to hear develop the argument, because my view of Bolsonaro is not a view of somebody who is able to create. So, because he might have sometimes some kind of populist rhetoric, but will you think that he's got a populist strategy, Bolsonaro? Well, maybe I'm wrong, because I know enough of the case of Brazil.
Yes.
Per side, I don't. Tanya, Katia, you think he's got a populist strategy, Bolsonaro?
Yes, I think he does.
Uh-huh.
He claims all the time to talk directly to the people and to bring the people conscience to the public arena, and he despises the political class, the parties. So I really think he has this kind of populism in himself. Strategy, yeah. But he's worse than that.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Yeah,
because he is I agree that he is a proto-fascist, and he really has a kind of necropolitic here in Brazil. So he is worse than Trump.
Yeah.
and other populists, but he uses populist
But
strategies.
is it only populist rhetoric? Because I think one should distinguish populist rhetoric. In fact, populist rhetoric, all politicians, in a sense, use that, you know, because they all claim. I remember the last French election, the legislative in 2017. They were saying, but they're all populists because, for instance, Macron, you know, they all were saying, I am speaking in the name of the people. And I was saying, well, of course, because there is a populist dimension in the democratic. Democracy is demos kratos, the power of the people. So you can't imagine, for instance, in a election in a democratic country, a party that says, we are the defensor of the interests of the privileged, or we are the interest of the... No, you need always to present your particular interest as the general interest. You know, you always need to say, and this is so this is what I get. There is a necessary popular dimension in democracy.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you, Chantal. You see, in Brazil, a recent poll found out that 75% of Brazilians favor the democracy. 75, it's powerful, it's a great number. But the problem is, what is democracy? So for Bolsonaro, he is the constitution, he is the president, he is the whole thing. And nowadays, I would say we have some difficulties to think about democracy in itself. What should we call democracy now with a kind of president that we have? If the people goes to the street to ask for constitutional authoritarianism, the military with Bolsonaro and the constitution. So you see, it's a lot of demands.
But you see that this is where I draw the line between right-wing populism and extreme right, because I'm also being criticized for not calling, for instance, Marine Le Pen extreme right or fascist, you know. But I say, look, strictly speaking, extreme right historically is a right which is putting into question the democratic principle, which is, you know, calling for violence, which is want to dismantle the constitution. So, and this is not at all what Marine Le Pen is doing. This is not at all, of course, you know, probably there will be, you know, to have some kind of more authoritarian thing. But on the other side, Macron is also moving to authoritarianism, you know, neoliberalism to the crisis, and that we could have another discussion about that, is getting more and more authoritarian. So move towards authoritarianism is different from fascism. The whole question is that, are you really willing? And my feeling is that this is definitively what the difference, for instance, right-wing populism and Bolsonaro, is that Bolsonaro is perfectly willing, you know, to have the army intervening, to not taking account of, you know, series of democratic procedure, and that is not, you know, that's the difference between, you know, right-wing populism within the context of the constitution. Let's say, for instance, again, and that's something that you are aware of, when I speak of, you know, the conflictual consensus, which is crucial for an agonistic debate. Well, the whole question is that for me, I don't think that, you know, the people, the extreme right or fascist should be part of the democratic debate. But right-wing populism, yes, because right-wing populism, they are in fact defending some interpretation of liberty and equality that, you know, are very restrictive. They exclude many categories, but they don't put in question the very basic of the democratic constitution. While, you know, fascists have done that, and extreme right also. And it seems to me that, in that case, Bolsonaro is more on the side of the ultra right, extreme right, and extreme right definitively, and proto-fascist.
Yes.
But we should. It would be really fascinating to have a discussion about, because I want to learn about Bolsonaro. I'm really, and I will also be interested to what you think about what did the PT do badly? Why? What were his mistakes? And I think that if in order for the left to recover in Brazil, they need to really understand what went wrong. Why did they lose?
I would say what is really dangerous is why PT is not able nowadays to join the other left forces. This is the situation. Not to go... Sorry, Vera?
We have a few more questions.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
Let's go to, there was a third person that was on the list to intervene.
Yes,
go
ahead.
Chantal, we have a few more questions that were written on the chat. So I'll propose that we take the questions and you pick the one you want to comment. Most of them go in the same track. So I think it would be better if we take the questions and then you answer. Is it okay for you?
Okay, yeah, but I thought that there was in principle 3 people who were supposed to know.
Yeah. But we have.
Who was the third person?
Vera.
No, it's me, but I can.
It was you.
But it's no problem. I have Stefanias, Thomas, Bustamante, Danielle, Lucas. So
okay, wait,
and Mirelli. So
okay, I can go till 4:30. So we could have 10
20 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Is it okay to?
Yeah. Give me all the question,
okay.
and I see which one I can pick.
Okay, so it's up to. Actually, I'll do a few comments and 2 quick questions, but you really don't have to answer. If we can go ahead and take the other ones that are related to. So I agree with you. I think that political intervention is what we philosophers and legal scholars should do in academy. But I'm still with Betania when she says that the term populism somehow matters. So what makes left populism a good strategy if the idea, if the term, if the notion of populism is not inherently democratic? It's a provocation, Chantal. So what differs populism from your perspective from other kinds of populism if historically the very idea of populism leads to authoritarian arrangements? So I'm insisting how the kind of populism you see as a strategy, a good strategy, is able to mobilize people at street level and reinvigorate democracy in times of fake news, for instance. So we have in the chat a few questions. So the first one is Stefania's question. She goes, you say that populism is characterized by anti-pluralism. in this sense, does
Wait a second. What?
You said that populism is characterized by anti-pluralism.
I never say anything like that.
Okay, she understood. Okay,
yeah,
so
no, but that's what Jan Werner Müller is saying. That that by definition, for me, left populism is completely pluralistic.
Okay, fine. So there is a question by Danielle Silva. Danielle Silva is there. And Mirelli also, so they could put the question for you. So I'll ask. There has been an enduring construction of affects by the corporate, the Operation Car Wash, and more recently by the WhatsApp mechanism in the Bolsonarist sphere. I believe that the enthusiasm is strictly connected to mediation, communication, and so on. Bolsonaro's team know this, and their populist articulation is very well tied together. They even read your work with Laclos. Mirelli asks, if there is time, is the fear and the creation of an enemy like US always did, Russians, Arabics, and Bolsonaro did too, PT, communists, immigrants, the base to create a mobilization of passion and affection? Lucas, are you there? So the other question by Lucas.
I can present my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Chantal, thank you for your considerations. My question is quite simple. So considering your definition of a populist moment, would you consider the need for a change in the perspective of constitutional theory, such to accommodate a radical democracy? So if so, can we institutionalize a reflexive perspective of constitutionalism?
Thank you.
Wait a second. Can you repeat? Because I was taking note and I missed something. What? Can you repeat it?
Of course. My question is if we can institutionalize a reflexive perspective of constitutionalism to accommodate a radical democracy in considering our populist moment.
Thomas, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
So I would have a comment and a question. The comment is very simple, is that I think that Bolsonarism proved Professor Chantal Mouffe's point. I mean, he emerged because of an articulation between the juridical elites and the mass media. So in a sense, people voted for him because they were manipulated and there was not a space of reasons for them to consider their choices in the election. But then comes my question: is the populist strategy still democratic when it is taken by the left? Because I think that, in a sense, it seems to assume that the people are not capable of rational agency by themselves. They need some sort of manipulation or some sort of action driven by affections rather than reasons. And I think that isn't this too high a price that we need to pay in order to fight right-wing populism? Do we need the same weapons that they use to make this resistance? This is my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are finished with the questions. Chantal, take the time you want, and thank you very much again for your kindly presentation.
Okay, well, I'm going to start from the last one. Look, I think that you definitively are speaking from the kind of theoretical perspective that I was criticizing, because you are thinking, why couldn't the people by themselves? I mean, if you start from an anti-essentialist perspective, you don't have those things that the people by themselves. That's completely essentialist. There are the idea that there are people who exist already with their, interests. And then the whole question is to let them speak. From the anti-essentialist perspective, I mean, politics is about the creation of political identities. Political identities are not there already given. They are created, and they are created by mobilization of passion, but also by, in fact, I am trying to, when I speak about passion, I also, it's not something purely rational. It's not something that is again reason. In fact, is basically to insist on the fact that when I was saying before, Spinoza said, ideas only have force when they meet affects. So, ideas, correct ideas without mobilizing passion won't take you anywhere. That's my main problem with most of the left. The left believe that you have to correct ideas, and that correct ideas will work by themselves. For instance, and again, and that's answer to another question, in a sense, to quote Spinoza again. Spinoza said, the only way to change, to remove an affect is by creating a stronger affect. You are not going. So basically, if you want to fight again the way in which Bolsonaro is mobilized affects, is not by kind of saying no, but you are not correct because that and that, is by mobilizing a stronger affect. That's my point, and this is basically what is taken in left-wing populism. Is understanding the importance of mobilizing affect if you want to fight. And basically, my main question, and this is why I insisted, is a very, very, my book is very partisan, of course, and it's very political. My question is that what can we do? How are we going to really impede the development of right-wing populism? How are we to fight with those right-wing populists? And this is why I say today we are at a crucial moment. Again, I'm speaking basically from Western Europe, because I think that this crisis of neoliberalism is opening an opportunity for a rupture with neoliberalism. But this rupture can be going into different direction. And here I would like to make the work of Karl Polanyi, which I think is very important for the particular conjuncture, because I see that the populist moment is a moment, Polanyi, the great transformation, analyze the situation, the crisis of, it was not neoliberalism at that point, capitalist system in the 30s. And he showed, in fact, all those movements, there was a movement of resistance against the advance of commodification. It was the advance of the first globalization. So society wanted to protect itself, to react against that. And he said, but those reactions, in fact, could be either progressive or regressive. And for instance, he said, in the case of the US, the reaction against this commodification was progressive because we had Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, who in fact used this opportunity in order to introduce state intervention. But he said, but another reaction, another form of reaction against that was fascism also. And so he say that, when you've got a moment in which there is a crisis in society, when the society feels that it is, threatened, and I think that basically this is what the situation we've got today, then, reaction can be going, into a progressive or regressive dimension. And I think that we are in that situation. So my question is that, how are we going precisely to intervene for the left so that, and I think that in the present conjuncture of the COVID-19 is even more pertinent, because clearly we are at the moment that this sanitary crisis have created a desire for protection. People feel that they want, so the danger is that they are going to vote for the people who they believe are better able to protect them. And this is why I think that, we must be aware that in this crisis, particularly the sanitary crisis, it creates a terrain that, of course, it is, in a sense, it is a possibility, it's an eventuality for an intervention, because clearly, I mean, the crisis, in a sense, accredit the thesis of the left about, we've seen the destruction of the public service. Obviously, the crisis has been exacerbated by neoliberalism. But it's a mistake to believe that automatically it's going to really, favor the left, because the right-wing populists can take advantage of that in order to present a project in people say, we are going to protect you, we are going to close the frontier. So I think it's important to realize that. And again, this is a moment where the mobilization of affects, passion towards ideal of conviviality, ideal of equality. It's a crucial moment. I'm really feeling strongly about that, I think that. But then, of course, you need to locate yourself into a specific perspective, which is anti-essentialist. That political identities are constructed. They can be constructed in different ways. Right-wing populists construct them in one way, and now what we've got to do is to construct them in another way. And here I'm referred to one of the questions. Obviously, it's very important to use all the détourner, use a series of things that the right is using. I mean, and of course, the WhatsApp and all those things that can be used in ways which are going to favor right-wing populists. And fortunately, those people have understood that very well. Thanks God, the left now is beginning to understand that. And for instance, left populist parties in Europe have become much more, much better in developing counter strategies, utilizing those same, digital techniques. That is important, but it's a terrain of struggle. The struggle for hegemony is done in great part in through the media, and we can't just leave that to the right and no. That's what the fascists do. Another question. Again, two questions there. I think that's something that I didn't say, and that refers to Vera's question more in a sense, is the fact in which a left populist movement is necessarily an articulation of what I call the horizontal moment with the vertical moment. Horizontal is the struggle, new social movement and things like that. That's it. And the vertical is the importance of challenging that through some kind of more institutional things, because what's at stake in that is to arrive to power, to take the state. Because of course, it's not enough. It's not that you win the election and then that's it. But winning the election is a condition to be able to transform, intervene in terms of the law, intervene in terms of making important institutional changes. So I don't think that, again, here I'm both critical of the purely horizontalist, and there is a strong tendency, I don't know if it's the case in Brazil, but in Europe, of those movements, who insist on the idea of the common, and they don't want the state because the state is necessarily authoritarian. And of course, on the other side, you've got those who believe that it's only through election and through parliamentary struggle that you are going to change things. So I think that we need to have an articulation of those, and this is for me what democracy is about, the articulation of the vertical and in fact, what is at stake is a pluralization of form of democracy. This is, again, the reason for which I am critical of those who say that we've got to abandon the representative democracy and establish, some kind of pure participatory democracy, and some people say we need to replace the election by the sortition. And I think we need many project of radical democracy is also a way of pluralizing form of democracy. Of course, I think at certain level, representative democracy we can't do without, but in some cases, participatory democracy, direct democracy, is a multi-scalar level of form of democracy. This is for me what is a left populist strategy. Another question is got to do with, I don't remember how it was formulated, but well, it's all the question of how you formulate the enemy, because the enemy or the adversary, because of course we could today in Western Europe, at least, I think that definitively the struggle must be a kind of agonistic struggle. It can't be an antagonistic, but it needs nevertheless to have an adversary, and this is because that has got to do with the basic question I was posing at the beginning, that politics is necessarily the construction of us and the them. But it depends how the us is constructed, how the them, and also the way, for instance, when I was just speaking of antagonism and agonism, the way they are going to relate, because they are form of populism which are antagonistic. And in fact, I think that one can give an example of antagonistic form of populism is the French Revolution, in which you had the construction of a frontier, the people and the establishment, the Ancien Regime, and then what was at stake was the destruction of the Ancien Regime. So that's so it's populist construction of the political frontier, but of course the objective was destruction, annihilation of the them. So that's an antagonistic form of populism. But today, in our democratic societies, then the question is not, and that is something that I've been saying in my work for a very long time. The question is not to break completely the station of liberty, but to radicalize them. And I think that's something which is very important to understand. This is what you need, some agonistic form of populism. And also in my book, and I think that might also be able to understand, I say that it's a form of what I call radical reformism, a left populist strategy. And I also say, if we imagine, what is the panorama on the left? Okay, what is the left? Well, of course, there is one left, which is the purely reformist left, which is basically what social democracy has become under the third way, in which there was not going to be any profound transformation of relation of power, acceptance of the situation as it is at the moment, and with some more improvement. On the other extreme, you've got still, they are not extremely important, but still exist, the kind of Leninist left. No, what we need is a break with capitalism, and I mean, not that the left populist strategy does not, have an anti-capitalist element. Of course it has got, because every strategy of radicalization of democracy will at some point encounter the obstacle that the capitalist relation for. But this is something, you know, what is not something that we are going to arrive to power and say, okay, we are going to abolish capitalism. You know, you can't abolish capitalism. You can abolish the death penalty, but you can't abolish capitalism. What you need to do is what Gramsci called a war of position, or Eric Olmreich speak of an eroding of capitalism. You know, so it's a process. But in order to do that, of course, it's important, you know, to arrive to win the election, and then hitting the institution to radicalize the democracy. But in this case, of course, you know, the adversary is the neoliberal system, and but it's to a strategy of radical reform, of what André Gortz used to speak of, non-reformist reform. You know, because they are, of course, reform which does not change the relation of power, but there are some reform which, in fact, have radical implication, and that this is the strategy of left populism. You know, so it's not a break Leninist revolution, but here, you know, through a war of position, creating the condition for, you know, an end to different relation of subordination, but not only in the level of the economy, socio-economic, but of course also, you know, linked with other form of oppression, like in terms of sex, in terms of race, and all the LGBT struggle. You know, this is what the left populist strategy aims at creating, and that's what I understand by radicalization of democracy.
Thank you so much, Chantal. So, Katia, you can close this section.
Chantal, thank you so much for. What would you like to say? Something?
No. Well, I say it was really a pleasure to meet you all and seeing you. So, Betania, are you in Rio? Or yeah, you are in Rio, and you, Vera, where are you?
Curitiba, Chantal.
Curitiba. Okay, good. Well, I hope we'll be able to meet. You are not going to come to Europe soon, Betania?
Perhaps in December. In December.
Perhaps. It depends on the virus.
To meet again, and you, Katia, any plan of coming?
No planning. Just to endure the virus for now, because all the frontiers are closed for Brazilians.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. In fact,
I think only after a vaccine be developed. Yeah.
Okay, well, but I hope that we'll be able to get together again at some point, somewhere.
Yes, of course.
Because there's so much that I would like to discuss with you about Brazil and Bolsonaro.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
great.
So that we
time
for another opportunity.
Yes.
Okay, all right then.
Chantal, thank you so much. I'd like to make an announcement that we are gonna have a break. We are having a break for 3 months in our Theory of Law in times of crisis, and we will return on August 4th at 6 p.m. with Professor Mark Graeber, and the title is Crisis and the Fate of Constitutional Democracy. Chantal, thank you again. Bye-bye.
Okay,
bye-bye, Chantal.
Thank you, Chantal.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.